In the middle of the 14th century, the world was alive. Markets were crowded. Church bells rang every morning. Merchants traveled across continents, carrying silk, spices, and stories from distant lands. No one knew that death was already moving with them. It did not arrive with armies. It carried no flag. There was no warning. Invisible to the eye, silent in its approach, a force unlike anything humanity had ever faced was spreading across the known world. Within a few years, it would erase entire families. Empty cities. Silence kingdoms. This catastrophe would become known as the Black Death. A plague so devastating that it killed millions. And permanently changed the course of human history. What you are about to see is not legend. It is not myth. This is the past. As it truly was. To understand the scale of the disaster, we must first understand the world before it began. Europe in the early 1300s was overcrowded and fragile. Cities had grown rapidly, but infrastructure had not kept up. Streets were narrow. Homes were packed tightly together. Waste was thrown directly into the roads. Clean water was rare. Rats were everywhere. Most people lived short, difficult lives. Disease was common. Malnutrition weakened immune systems. Medical knowledge was extremely limited. Doctors did not understand bacteria or infection. They believed illness came from bad air, planetary alignment, or divine punishment. Bloodletting was common. Herbs were prescribed. Prayer was often the only treatment. Europe was already vulnerable. It simply did not know it yet. Despite its weaknesses, Europe was more connected than ever before. Trade routes stretched across continents. The Silk Road linked Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. Ships crossed the Mediterranean daily. Caravans moved between empires. This exchange brought wealth, culture, and progress. But it also brought something else. Something deadly. Hidden among cargo, inside ships, and beneath the floors of merchant vessels. Rats and fleas carried a bacterium humanity had never faced on this scale. The world was about to pay the price of connection. By the time the disease reached major trade hubs near the Black Sea, it was unstoppable. In 1347, ships left these ports heading for Europe. Their crews were already dying. When the ships docked, horror followed. Sailors collapsed on decks. Bodies were covered in dark swellings. Death spread faster than fear. Within days, the disease moved into cities. Ports became epicenters. From there, the plague radiated outward. Along roads, rivers, and trade routes. Europe had no defense. And no understanding. Once the Black Death entered Europe, it spread with terrifying speed. There were no borders. No safe cities. No immunity. Entire regions fell within months. The disease moved faster than messengers. By the time warnings arrived, it was already too late. What made the plague truly deadly was its ability to change form. The Black Death did not strike in only one way. It came in three forms. The most common was bubonic plague. Victims developed sudden fever, chills, and unbearable pain. Large, swollen lymph nodes, called buboes, appeared in the groin, neck, and armpits. Skin darkened as internal bleeding occurred. This is where the name Black Death came from. For many, death followed within 3 to 5 days. But some suffered something even worse. The second form was pneumonic plague. This version attacked the lungs. Victims coughed violently, spreading infection through the air. Breathing became impossible. Blood filled the lungs. This form was almost always fatal. And could kill within 24 hours. The third and most terrifying form was septicemic plague. The infection entered the bloodstream directly. There were often no warning signs. Victims collapsed. Organs failed. Death could come within hours. There was no treatment. No cure. Only fear. As the plague spread, daily life collapsed. Families locked themselves indoors. The sick were abandoned. The dead were left in the streets. Fear destroyed compassion. Neighbors stopped helping neighbors. Friends avoided one another. Parents fled from their own children. Doctors were powerless. They wore long coats and bird-like masks filled with herbs, believing bad smells caused illness. Nothing worked. Europe's great cities became death traps. London. Paris. Florence. Bodies piled faster than they could be buried. Gravediggers worked day and night, until they too fell ill. Mass graves replaced cemeteries. Church bells rang endlessly, until there were no priests left to ring them. The sound of life disappeared. With governments overwhelmed, law and order began to collapse. Markets closed. Trade stopped. Food supplies vanished. Some people turned to extreme religion. Others turned to violence. Flagellant groups marched through cities, whipping themselves in public, believing pain would stop the plague. Reason was replaced by desperation. As death spread, people searched for answers. Many blamed minorities, foreigners, and outsiders. Jewish communities were accused of poisoning wells. Thousands were tortured, expelled, or killed. The plague did not just destroy lives. It destroyed trust. By the early 1350s, Europe was unrecognizable. Entire towns were empty. Fields lay untouched. Silence replaced civilization. But the plague was not finished. By the early 1350s, something began to change. The endless deaths slowed. New infections became less frequent. Cities that had been overwhelmed by silence slowly began to breathe again. No one knew why the plague was retreating. Some believed God had shown mercy. Others believed the disease had simply run out of victims. In truth, a combination of factors, immunity, changes in climate, and reduced population density, played a role. But the damage had already been done. Those who remained stepped into a broken world. Entire villages stood empty. Homes were abandoned. Tools lay rusting in fields that would not be harvested. Labor was suddenly rare. Survivors realized something unprecedented. Their work was valuable. Peasants demanded wages. Workers moved freely. Old obligations were questioned. The rigid feudal system began to crack. For centuries, European society had been fixed. Nobles ruled. Peasants served. The plague shattered this balance. Lords struggled to control workers. Governments passed laws to freeze wages. But they failed. A new social reality was forming, one driven by opportunity rather than birth. With fewer people and more resources, living standards slowly improved. Education expanded. Art flourished. Ideas traveled. Humanity began to question authority, tradition, and belief. From unimaginable suffering emerged creativity. The foundations of the Renaissance were laid in the shadow of death. The plague exposed the failures of medieval medicine. Superstition lost credibility. Observation became essential. Physicians began recording symptoms. Quarantine practices emerged. While progress was slow, the shift toward scientific thinking had begun. The Black Death was more than a pandemic. It was a mirror. It revealed humanity's fragility and resilience. It reshaped economies, religion, medicine, and culture. Modern Europe was born from its ashes. The Black Death killed millions. But it also transformed the world. It ended one era and began another. This catastrophe reminds us that history is not only shaped by kings and wars, but by unseen forces. This is the past. Not forgotten. Not imagined. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to explore more of the unseen past. History, Reborn.